Chapter 4. The Search. Saint-Domingue, 1755. Then Paris, 1866. Sleeping in handcuffs was not for the weak. There was no way to get comfortable. His wrists ached, his shoulders and neck were so stiff he felt he could barely turn his head. By dawn, the last of his adrenaline had drained away, leaving behind nothing but an exhausted, hollow shell of the man he had been the day before. It wasn't until midday that the commissaire released him from his bedroom prison and dragged him once again to his brother's study, finally removing his restraints. This time, Louise was nowhere to be seen. Charles sat behind his desk, exuding an air of business as usual. Weakly, Antoine mumbled, "Did you kill her?" Charles scoffed. "Why would we do that? That would be a reckless loss of money. No, I didn't kill her." Antoine perked up slightly. "Where is she?" "Sold. You will not be seeing her again," Charles responded plainly. "You sold her," Antoine balked. "The Baron and I reached an agreement. She won't tempt you any longer." "How dare you?" "You had no right," Antoine shot back, his voice trembling with fury. "I have every right," Charles replied coldly. "It is done, and hear me, brother, if you see her again, you will be disinherited." "I don't care about the fucking inheritance. You can't just go and deny me my happiness. You do not own my life. You are just my hear that, younger brother. You are everything that is evil in this world. She was good and kind, and you ruined her." "She is a slave. There's nothing to ruin." "Fuck you!" Charles leaned over the desk, looking seriously over the edge of his reading spectacles. "Do not try to find her, Antoine. You are banned from the Baron's lands. You will never see her again." "You can't just ban me from walking where I please. I am not a slave." "No, but you are a fool," Charles said flatly as he began to dip his quill back into the inkwell. "I will kill you!" Antoine screamed, his voice shaking with rage. "No, you won't," Charles replied calmly, setting down his quill. "Without me, you are ruined. You have gambled away your fortune, and father has removed you from the family line. I am your only hope of avoiding a penniless existence. I am the one paying your debts. You may love adventure, brother, but you would make a terrible pauper. Your tastes are far too expensive." Antoine let out a guttural roar and lunged across the room, seizing Charles by the lapel. With a fierce swing, he landed a punch squarely on Charles's jaw. The impact sent them crashing to the floor, where they grappled like rabid animals, trading blows with raw, unfiltered fury. They rolled across the room, knocking over chairs and scattering papers. Antoine gained the upper hand, pinning Charles beneath him, his hands tightening around his brother's throat. But Charles was fumbling blindly behind him, his fingers clawing at the desk drawer. With a desperate twist, he threw Antoine off and scrambled to retrieve what he sought. The moment he turned back, the rules had changed. Antoine was staring dead into the barrel of a pistol. His breath came in heaving gasps. Slowly, he raised his hands in surrender, his pulse thundering in his ears. "Stop, brother. It's over," Charles wheezed. Despite the exertion, his voice was still biting and authoritative. "You would kill your own brother," Antoine breathed. "It is starting to feel an awful lot like self-defense," Charles growled. "Think, Antoine. This fight is idiotic." With a frustrated roar, Antoine hurled a chair across the room. A leg cracked right off and ricocheted back towards him, forcing him to parry slightly. "Fuck you, Charles!" Antoine stormed out and slammed the door loudly behind him. Antoine knew Charles had him against a wall. Without Charles, he was ruined. Furthermore, now that all the commissaires of Cap Français knew exactly how he had threatened to kill his brother. If he made a move against Charles, it would surely land him in a jail cell. But maybe he could have better luck with the Baron de Vaste himself. He immediately hopped over the fence, not bothering to take the road, and marched right to the front door. He wasn't expecting the Baron to be waiting, pistol in hand. Antoine hadn't had two pistols pointed at him in such rapid succession since the war. "Where's Louise?" Antoine demanded, trying to hide the desperation in his voice. "I will buy her from you. Just tell me how much." "Leave my property, Antoine," the Baron responded with detached calmness. "How much?" Antoine pleaded. "She is no longer here," the Baron said flatly. "Is she all right?" "I whipped her for devilishly seducing a white man, and then I sold her." "Where?" "I won't tolerate any more of your trouble. Get off my land. I will call the gendarme if you don't leave." "Where is she? Please, I need to know," Antoine insisted, his frustration mounting. "The terms of my agreement with your brother were explicit. I am under no obligation to reveal her whereabouts, and I will not," the Baron replied firmly. Antoine's anger was reaching a boiling point. "I'm going to destroy Charles," he raged. "You're going to go home," the Baron countered coolly. "I can't go back," Antoine begged. "Perhaps," the Baron said with finality, "but you are not welcome here." The day just kept getting worse. Defeated, Antoine trudged back to his brother's estate, his mind racing. He needed to be free of Charles, but without money? He was stuck. He had to find a way. Then a thought dawned on him. He had always been particularly fond of gemstones, and he remembered a couple nights ago Charles's wife, Marianne, wore a magnificent sapphire necklace to a dinner party. She looked like a queen. The necklace would certainly sustain him for a time. It could be a start. He climbed the stairs toward her room, but the murmur of voices stopped him short. She was inside with her maid. He couldn't just barge in and steal her jewelry while she was there. It would have been so easy. But he had nothing against Marianne. It wouldn't be fair for her to suffer for her husband's sins. So he turned back down the stairs and made his way to the dining room. He began furiously opening cabinets. The china plates were worth a pretty penny, but they were so fragile. The silver, however, would fetch a solid price. He hurried to his room, grabbed a length of linen, and began gathering what he could. As he turned to leave, his gaze landed on a pair of candlesticks. They were exquisite and intricately engraved, likely worth more than all the silverware combined. But they weren't just expensive, they were heirlooms, a gift from a bishop generations ago when their ancestor was granted the Order of St. John of Jerusalem. He hesitated, his teeth clenching. A man like Charles didn't deserve treasures such as these. Besides, as the eldest, they were his to inherit. They were heavy, but he stuffed them hastily into his sack, then ran up to store them under his bed. He looked out the window, and at last, all the pieces fit together. He knew exactly what he would do. He almost ran out into the field, where an enslaved man named Rodrigue was working. Antoine trotted right up to the man, causing the wary laborer to jump. "You hate my brother, don't you?" Antoine asked slyly. Rodrigue looked shocked and frightened. I have never said that, master sir." "Oh, I'm not implying what you think. But I know that when my asshole brother had your twin boys whipped last month, you were furious. I could see your anger all the way across the field." "I didn't mean it. No, sir, please. I love the master," Rodrigue pleaded. "No, you don't," Antoine said coldly. "But don't worry, Rodrigue. I hate him too." "What are your boys called again?" Rodrigue swallowed hard, looking skittish. "Their names are Catin and Cupidon, master." "Good," Antoine said. I have an idea. If I were to leave La Guinaude tonight, permanently, would you and your sons come with me? You, sir? Are you running away? I suppose that is what you would call it, Antoine grumbled. I did not know that was something a white man could do. I need to find Louise, and I believe people of well, your kind could help me locate her. He half expected Rodrigue to look shocked, but he must have already been aware of what Charles and his cronies did. Unsurprising, he supposed. He had always heard slaves were adept at gossip. I do think we could help you find her, sir, Rodrigue replied. Good. Tell no one, but be ready tonight. Of course, sir. And Rodrigue, whichever one of you finds her, I'll set free. Rodrigue dropped the rake he was holding. His eyes lit up. Thank you, sir, he whispered. Guard this secret with your life. Tonight, at the tree on the fence line. Antoine spent the rest of the day drinking and devising his plan. He looked over maps, trying to figure out what towns she could have ended up in. The slave markets were usually along the coasts. Just as night was beginning to fall, he wrote a letter to leave in his stead for Charles to discover the next morning. In no uncertain terms, Antoine articulately laid out all of his thoughts regarding his brother in a very uncensored manner and made it incredibly clear that he would not be returning to Cap Français. Once he was sure the house was asleep, Antoine snuck into the study, grabbed the slave papers for Rodrigue and his sons, and snatched as much money as he could find from Charles's desk drawers. He didn't find much, but it would get him started. Then he snuck to the tree, cloaked in shadows and carrying 3 bags laden with his belongings and stolen riches. The 3 men awaiting him were nearly invisible in the dark. The moon was covered by clouds, making the depth of the night even more daunting than usual. But Antoine was ready. He was going to find Louise, but before he left, he would get his revenge. Rodrigue, I need to know something. Anything, sir. Thank you, sir. Antoine took a deep breath. It was harder to say the words than he expected. After they raped her, where did they take her? I assume you know. Rodrigue's voice grew stern, his words syncopated but forceful. The storage shed, sir. They tied her up and kept her there, beaten and naked all night. I'm going to burn it down, Antoine said with resolute determination. A smile curled at the corner of Rodrigue's lips. I'll get you a torch. The storage shed was full of coffee beans laid out to dry. With the 3 enslaved men standing witness, and astride Charles's favorite horse, Antoine threw the fire onto the thatched roof of the shed. It went up quickly. Antoine took a deep breath, drinking in the smoke that symbolized his vengeance. He waited for a moment, basking in the glow of his victory. But it didn't take long before a bell clanged desperately nearby and people began to shout the call to temper the flames. We have to go, Antoine said. Keep pace, because if you fall too far behind, the slave catchers will get you and cut off your manhood. I will not stop for you. And if you want my protection, you need to be with me. I have your papers. The men nodded, and as Antoine spurred his horse forward, they began to run, their bare feet pounding the dirt road like the beat of a fervent drum. Before Antoine had come to Saint-Domingue, he had fought in the Polish succession crisis. He knew how to ride at a pace that running men could follow, but tonight he pushed the limits of human endurance as the 3 men ran behind him, carrying Antoine's bags. As morning dawned, they approached the town of Vaudreuil. Despite having barely slept in 2 days, Antoine felt invigorated by the night's excitement. He had, in a single night, burned a large portion of his brother's crop, stolen his property, and certainly enraged Charles beyond measure. All he had left to do to cement his revenge was find Louise and marry her. He could have ridden for several more hours, but he knew Rodrigue and his sons were too exhausted to continue. Plus, he wanted a drink. He checked into a local inn and left his 3-man entourage to rest in the stable. As the sun was already rising, most of the pubs had closed many hours before, but the innkeeper was extremely accommodating and found Antoine some sustenance for himself and his men. Antoine was giddy with excitement, but the feeling didn't last. After a few days, it became incredibly clear that just randomly looking through towns for a single specific slave girl was an ineffectual task. But Antoine refused to let Charles win. They searched plantations and slave markets, but the harder they looked, the less hope for success that Antoine felt. He was near the point of giving up when he was visited by a surprise guest at dinner one night. He was sitting in a tavern in the town of Jacmel, all the way in the southern tip of the island, when he was approached with a letter by the commissaire de police. "Antoine David de la Pailletterie?" the officer asked, though he seemed perfectly aware of who Antoine was. "Who is asking?" Antoine asked cautiously. "Don't play with me." The officer dropped a letter on the tavern table, paid a livre to the bartender, who had likely been the loose-tongued informant, and then turned to leave the pub. Antoine recognized his brother's insignia on the wax. His hands were shaking as he cracked open the seal. Antoine, please see the enclosed letter from my lawyer. You are to cease and desist your loathsome behavior immediately. You have proven yourself to be an imbecile, so I will summarize my lawyer's threats in as simple terms as I can. 1. You are no longer welcome on La Guinaudet. Should you ever be seen on the premises, you will be arrested and charged for arson, theft, and attempted fratricide. 2. You will never receive a single livre of the family fortune. Any chance of gaining father's title is hereby revoked. Your name is forever sullied. 3. I will no longer pay your debts. If your debtors come seeking you, I will tell them where to find you. 4. I am saddened by your behavior, and I wish things could have ended differently. But I no longer have the patience for your misconduct. I urge you to turn your life around, stop seeking that woman, and spend time with God and your conscience. I only regret that once you do, you will no longer find open arms awaiting you in La Guinaudet, for you are not the prodigal son. As your blood, I wish you luck in life. As a man aggrieved, I send you this warning. Sincerely, Marquis Charles David de la Pailletterie. Antoine's heart swelled with pride. He could practically smell Charles's fury emanating from the ink on the parchment. Damn the consequences and damn the inheritance. This letter was everything he had dreamed it would be. Antoine could only imagine Charles's face when he saw his entire harvest had been reduced to ash, as the aroma of roasted coffee lingered in the air to taunt him. It would take him months to recuperate those profits. Of course, this did solidify what he already knew. His financial options were dwindling, but he would find a way to manage. At least he had this beautiful letter to motivate him. His only regret was that he still hadn't found Louise, and at this point he was running low on funds and had already checked most major trading ports in Saint-Domingue. He had started his journey in the far north, and now he was very near the southern tip of the island. The truth was, he had begun to lose hope in his quest, and as a result, he had filled his frustration with alcohol. He would often stay in the taverns until closing time and then wander the streets of each different town in a drunken haze, alternating between pompous self-congratulation and lovesick despair. But finally, his luck began to change. It was around noon in the small town of Jérémy, but Antoine was still sleeping off another long night of too much rum when he heard a painfully loud knock at the door of his room at the inn. "Master Antoine!" Rodrigue's excited voice called through the wood. "Monsieur, open up!" Antoine sat up like a bolt. The blood rushed to his head and he felt dizzy, but he didn't care. He opened the door with all the energy he could muster. "What news?" he asked eagerly. "I found her, master, I did." "How? Are you certain?" "I think so, sir," Rodrigue replied eagerly. "I was talking to some people in the market and learned about a new slave girl fitting Louise's description. She arrived just a few weeks ago. They weren't certain about her name, but she definitely was sold here from up north in Cap Français. They said she was tall, about 16, beautiful but badly bruised when she arrived." "This is promising, Rodrigue. Do you know where they took her?" "Yes, sir," Rodrigue replied. "There is a plantation at the end of Rue Bois, at the edge of the woods. It's on the edge of Jérémy, owned by a man named Maubier." "Then there is no time to lose. Fetch your sons and ready my horse. I ride to the Rue Bois immediately." Antoine quickly donned his finest garments. But just before he was about to leave, a sudden and severe bout of nausea overtook him. He felt his chest tightening with panic. He had little money and no right to claim her. How would he get her back? The sheer impossibility of it all made his head spin. He needed to calm down. He descended the stairs to the inn's tavern and ordered a glass of rum. Then he ordered another. The burn of the alcohol sent a wave of instant calm over his unsettled nerves, so he decided to purchase the entire bottle. For courage, on the road. He didn't bring Rodrigue with him. A simple trip across town was something he could handle on his own, and he preferred to do it without the judgment of anyone else, regardless of their skin color. Unfortunately, Jérémy was more confusing than he had bargained for. The locals' directions were maddeningly convoluted, and it took far longer than he anticipated to reach the end of Rue Bois. Each wrong turn led to another frustrated sip of rum, so by the time he finally arrived at Plantation Maubier, he was far deeper into his bottle than he had intended. The road leading up to the main house was lined with trees. It was beautiful, yet simple, not half as grand as the plantations in Cap Français. Still, there were at least 20 enslaved people maintaining the land. He kicked his horse gently forward, nudging cautiously. The length of the driveway seemed to be growing longer, though it was probably just the rum. He was grateful that his horse was steady, or he might have slipped off the side. A black man walked around the side of the house carrying a large sack and began to walk down the drive. He deliberately avoided sharing the road with Antoine, as was customary in Saint-Domingue. Antoine began to yell, "You! Come here, I need to talk to you!" The man stopped, stunned. Cautiously, he stepped off the grass and onto the road, approaching Antoine, keeping his gaze down respectfully. As he neared, he shifted the sack's weight onto his other shoulder. It looked quite heavy. "Yes, sir. How may I help you?" he asked. Antoine replied firmly, "I'm looking for someone. Her name is Louise. I think she was sold here." "I think you should talk to the master, sir," the man responded quietly. Antoine grew impatient. He wanted answers, and this man was dancing around them. "Is she here?" he demanded. "She is tall, beautiful. Her name is Louise." "I think you better go to the main house, sir. Maybe someone there can help you." Antoine dismounted from his horse, tossing his reins to the man, who stared at him with surprise. "Hold her steady," Antoine ordered, ironically, as he stumbled up the long tree-lined driveway. It wasn't until he was standing on his own feet that he realized just how light-headed he truly was. The trees certainly had to be solid on the ground, but to his eyes they appeared to dance and taunt him in his inebriated state. Yet he pressed forward, shouting, "Louise! I'm here for He tripped and fell face first onto the dirt path. Suddenly, a white man, who was probably an overseer, ran toward him and pulled him to his feet. "What on God's earth are you doing?" "I'm looking for Louise. Forgive me. I'm sorry. I don't usually appear this way, but I was told she was here." "Louise?" "She was sold here by the Baron de... the Baron from Cap Francais. Damn it, I can't remember his fucking title, but I'm looking for Louise. I must find her. She's a slave girl, 16, tall, beautiful." The white man looked startled. "Let me bring you inside. Maybe the mistress can be of help," the man said. Antoine realized how he must appear. His best pantaloons, though clearly expensive with intricate stitching, were now covered in dust and marred by a slight tear at the knee. Despite clearly being a man of means, he was calling loudly for a slave girl in a state of undeniable drunkenness. He felt his throat tighten with embarrassment. Antoine was led inside the modest house. "Mistress Anna," the man called up the stairs, "a visitor is here, looking for a slave girl." He turned to Antoine. "I'll send someone in to get you settled." Antoine looked around. It was a simple plantation, substantially smaller than his brother's or the Baron's. But it was clean and covered in vases full of fresh flowers. Outside, he saw a little black boy chasing a dog that was running through the grass with a piece of wayward laundry in its mouth. His lips quirked into a faint smile. He had found her. He could feel it. He saw a mirror hanging on the wall. It was a little discolored. His ivory skin looked almost yellow in its reflection, though it could have been the dirt. He wiped a large spot over his brow, adjusted his tousled wig, and dusted off his overcoat. Clearing his throat, he awaited his host. While he waited, a young girl, perhaps 8 years old, entered and offered him a drink, which he politely declined. The wait was agonizing, but soon a woman descended the stairs. She wore a rosary around her neck and a black dress buttoned high above her collar. It was plain but lovely, exuding an air of grace and nobility, as if she were a woman living below her true status. She looked at Antoine with a hint of masked disapproval, taking in his ragged appearance. He jumped out of the chair and bowed deeply, trying to make a good impression. "You are most welcome to our home, monsieur," she said, her accent rich and melodic, possibly Spanish or Portuguese. Her black hair had a distinctive curl that was tied into a bun. "Thank you, madame," Antoine said, straightening up. "I apologize for my intrusion." His manners, which he had honed in the French chateau of his childhood, helped conceal the evidence of his drunkenness. However, try as he might, his foul breath gave his true condition away. Thankfully, Madame Maubier kept her distance. "I regret, my lord, that I have not seen you before. If you are here for my husband, I am afraid he has gone to visit family and is unlikely to return for several weeks." "Madame, forgive me. I understand the need to wait for your husband, but I need to know if you purchased a slave girl named Louise. It is my intention to purchase her freedom, but I have had trouble locating her," Antoine said emphatically. "I understand your intentions, sir," she replied, "but I simply cannot negotiate those terms without my husband present." "Of course," he said with a hint of frustration. "But forgive me, madame. I just need to know if it is her. Is there any way to confirm that, at least?" "What is your intention with her?" Anna asked cautiously. "Madame, I know it is quite irregular, but Louise is very special to me, personally." "I see," Anna said, surveying the disheveled Marquis disapprovingly. It wasn't that interracial relationships didn't occur in Saint-Domingue. They did, frequently. But there was still a social stigma, and some planters were less open to it than others. Madame Maubier seemed more conservative than many on the island. She turned to the young girl who had offered Antoine a drink earlier and said, "Go fetch the new girl. Quickly now." Antoine felt his heart pounding so hard he could almost hear it. Anna looked at him suspiciously. We have been talking for some time, but I fear I missed your name, monsieur. Forgive me, Antoine replied politely. I am Antoine David de la Pailletterie, eldest son of the Marquis David de la Pailletterie of Belvianco. Ah, a peninsulare, she replied, her stern expression loosening slightly. Yes, madame. I came over after the war in search of new economic opportunities here. Please forgive my appearance. I have traveled many hours to arrive today. Yes, I see that, she replied tersely. A gentle knock on the door interrupted them, and the little girl popped her head through. Enter, Anna said. The girl curtsied. Behind her was Louise. She kept her gaze fixed on the floor. Antoine felt an overwhelming urge to run to her, but Anna made it excruciatingly clear that that would not be an option. Stay there, girl, Anna commanded. Turning to Antoine, she asked, Is this the slave you are looking for? Perhaps I could take a closer look, he requested. Of course he recognized her, but he didn't need Anna to realize his desperation. 2 steps forward, girl, and look up, Anna instructed. Louise curtsied and moved exactly 2 steps. Slowly, she lifted her face and looked directly at Antoine. His heart skipped a beat. Her face bore the scars of their pain. There was a large, partially healed cut above her eyelid, but it was her eyes that sucked him in. They looked so terrified and injured. Without a word, he knew she was begging him to save her. May I? He asked Anna, gesturing to Louise. She nodded. Anna was likely expecting him to examine her the way slave traders did, looking at her teeth, hands, or breasts. But Antoine reached forward, his hands moving of their own accord, drawn to her face. His hand was shaking as his fingertips just barely graced her cheeks. Anna took a sudden step closer, reconsidering. Not like that. I think that would be most improper. She studied his face before asking, Is this the one? Yes, madame, he replied, forcing himself to step back. Her name is Louise. Anna took a deep breath. Girl, bring us some tea. I'm interested to hear how much this man thinks you are worth. France, 1866. A hand graced Ada's shoulder, causing her to jump slightly. Is my father bothering you again? It was Alexandre's eldest son, who was coincidentally also named Alexandre. No, your father was just telling me a story, she replied. Don't believe a word my father says. There is as much history to this tale as there are pigs in the sky. The great Alexandre Dumas can weave fiction better than Arachne and Athena, the young Alexandre joked. Though dashing and closer in age to Ada, he lacked the luster and effortless charisma that made the elder Alexandre Dumas such a captivating storyteller. Perhaps it was because he was illegitimate. Posh, Alexandre gasped dramatically. How would you know if it is fiction or not? This is our family story. This was your great... Oh, wait. Which grandparent is this? It's 2 greats, father. Ancient history, if you could call it that, he replied, grabbing a glass of wine from a nearby servant. But what happened next? Ada insisted. Alexandre puffed himself up. The lady wishes to know what happens next, and I cannot disappoint my adoring fans. The younger Alexandre rolled his eyes and walked away to refill his glass. Did Madame Maubier sell Louise to him? No. You see, her husband had gone to visit his cousin in Jamaica, so my grandfather had to wait. He took a job in town, hoping to earn some money to buy his own plantation, far from Charles. Did he find one? Ada asked. Yes. It wasn't much, not like La Guinaudet, but it was his. The land was good, fertile, beautiful, but he did have to change his name. Antoine de Lille. To hide from Charles? Ada asked. Charles and anyone else he may have owed money to. Did he at least get to meet with Louise? Anna Maubier would not allow it. "That's horrible," Ada said softly. "I know, but he found a way. He was always resourceful. With Anna's husband gone, he started offering his services around her plantation. It was primarily secretarial, but it let him be near her. The menial tasks around the Maubier plantation gave my grandfather the stolen glances of his love that he so helplessly craved." "But he could never touch her?" Ada asked, wrapping her hand around Alexandre's forearm. Not even speak to her. He was so close, and yet she was still so far. He would pass her in the corridor, close enough to smell the faint scent of lavender on her skin. When she served him tea as he went through Anna's ledgers, the distance between their hands was sometimes no more than a grain of sand. Sometimes he would catch her reflection in the polished silver. He stood at the threshold of her world, but could not enter, barred by silence, circumstance, and the cruelty of unwelcome patience. Ada squeezed him gently. "How long did they have to suffer like that?" "Months," Alexandre said. "But it gave her time to heal, on the outside at least. She regained her weight, her bruises disappeared, and finally, after months of waiting and watching from a nearby distance, Monsieur Maubier returned."